University of Hawaii Hilo Campus Vegetable Garden Project for Sustainable Agriculture 230. My garden is located on the University of Hawaii at Hilo campus. On Noello Street, between the Student Life Center and the Hale Olelo building. Next to the bridge over My garden consists of 2 raised garden beds. The garden beds are made of lava stones. On the right, you'll see bed number 1, which is consists completely of sweet potatoes. In bed number 2, you'll see I have planned turmeric, taro, red bell pepper, tomato, and basil. My plan is organized in the square foot gardening method. I recorded which days I attend my garden. And as you'll see in this graph, I almost always attend my garden on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I often attend my garden on Mondays and Saturdays, and I occasionally attend my garden on Wednesdays and Fridays. I never attend my garden on Sundays. I attend my garden on average 2 to 5 times a week. On my first week, I cleared my garden bed. On my second week, I weeded the poor-looking sweet potato plants and planted tubers that I bought from the local organic grocery store. I also planted a row of taro tubers, which I bought from the local organic grocery store. On the third week, I planted turmeric tubers, which I bought at the local organic grocery store, and I planted a tomato transplant. On the 4th week, I discovered from my Hawaiian ethnobotany class that I planted my sweet potato and taro plants wrong. So on this week, I dug out my taro corms and planted taro sucker transplants, which consists of the stalk of the taro plant. As for my sweet potato bed, I went with the Hawaiian mound method, which is useful on the Big Island of Hawaii because we have shallow dirt depth here compared to on the mainland. The traditional Hawaiian mound method involves creating a mound of dirt, digging a channel in which you plant sweet potato suckers. A sweet potato sucker is a vine from a sweet potato plant with the leaves pulled off. Everywhere that a leaf has been pulled off of the main stem is a node, and from each node will grow the roots of a sweet potato plant. I planted the sweet potato suckers in the channel and then buried the suckers in a mound, leaving a watering well in the middle of the mound. This is the proper way of planting sweet potatoes here on the Big Island of Hawaii. On week 5, I planted a row of red bell pepper transplants. And my tomato plant is growing well. On week 6, I planted 2 purple basil plants and begun fertilizing my garden beds. On this week, I used 14-14-14 fertilizer mixed with dirt, then watered in. This is the only time I used inorganic fertilizer in my garden. After this point, I only used organic fertilizers. The other fertilizer I began using in my garden beds, is composted cow manure tea every week. As you can see, my sweet potato is suckers are beginning to sprout. On week 7, chickens had destroyed one of my bell pepper plants and 1/4 of my sweet potato mound. So on this week 7, I replanted a new bell pepper transplant and rebuilt my sweet potato donut mound. As you can see, my sweet potatoes have more sprouts than the previous week and is growing very well. On week 8, one of my turmerics has begun to sprout, and my tomato plants are growing many tomatoes. My tomato plant is also growing taller than the trellis for my tomato plants. And my sweet potato bed is about 1/4 covered with sweet potato vines. On week 9, chickens had pecked at the lowest hanging tomatoes on my tomato plant, so I removed those tomatoes. Weeding has gotten more difficult now that my plants have gotten larger. On week 10, chickens continue to eat my lower hanging tomatoes. My tomato trellis is getting increasingly top-heavy, so I begin propping the trellis with sticks to stabilize it. All my plants are doing well, and my sweet potatoes are overflowing with vines and leaves out of its raised bed. I still have a few tomatoes high on the tomato plant, but every week I have to readjust the sticks propping up my tomato trellis. My tomatoes have begun to form white on the leaves, which look like mildew, but does not wipe off like mildew. I often use the cow manure compost tea and vermicompost tea to fertilize my garden. The tomatoes high on my plant are growing well, and my turmeric now has 4 plants coming out of the spot that I planted, and no turmeric plants coming out of the other 2 spots where I have planted. My tomato plant and basil plants are looking weak, but they're still alive and producing edible food, and all the rest of my plants are growing well.